Welcome to Real Talk, brought to you by Roberta's house. This is a space for honest conversations about grief, healing, and everything in between. Grief shows up in moments we don't expect and stays longer than we planned. This podcast is about making space for those moments and the people living through them. No scripts, no pressure, just real people telling the truth about what it means to carry loss and keep going.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Real Talk with Roberta's house, where we create a safe space to have honest conversations about grief, healing, and hope. I'm your host, Bazil. Joining me today is the Senator of the 45th District in Baltimore City, Senator Cory McCray. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for the opportunity.
How are you doing today?
I'm blessed, man, 10 times over.
Well, for our viewers, just give us a background story of who you are, born and raised in Baltimore, and your experiences that got you where you are today.
Yep. First, born and raised, as you said, son of Baltimore City. I graduated from Fairmount Harford, right there on Harford and 25th. I'm an electrician by trade out of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been purchasing homes up and down Bel Air Road since I was 20 years of age. I got my training wheels in the Maryland House of Delegates, and I'm currently serving in my second term in the Maryland State Senate. And let me be clear and start off that it's a proud privilege, a humble honor to be able to do so. I live in Overly. I live there with my wife, Demetria, and we're raising now 4 children. I got a Kennedy, I got a Reagan, I got a CJ, I got a Bryson, 18, 17, 12, and 10.
Oh, right. All right. That's amazing. That's awesome. That's beautiful. Talk about your time growing up in Baltimore City. Baltimore City has been known for a lot of things. I don't know if you experience it, but some conversations, from people who are not from here, all you hear about is like, is it like The Wire? Is that all that you experience? So for you, what was that experience growing up in Baltimore?
Bazil, I would say that I had a real Baltimore experience. I can remember, and I tell my young people that you don't know what you don't know. So my mom didn't know that she was supposed to send her son to kindergarten. So I started school in the first grade. I went to Rocknell Heights, and I can remember all of my teachers, Bazil. I remember Miss Slide, Miss Solomon, Miss McCoy, Miss Allen, Miss Lanier, my principal, Sarah Horsey, because every day that I walked in that building, I felt like I was great. And they were the ones that were ensuring that young people felt like they were great. Bazil, as I think about my transition from elementary school to middle school, I tell my young people that when you're transitioning, you're trying your best to figure out where's your space, who are your people, but more importantly, how do you not succumb to peer pressure? I did succumb to that peer pressure. So I went to Rockland, I went to Chicopee for 4 months, I went to Winston for a year, I went to Emerson for 4 months, I went to Northern for a year and a half, and I told you I graduated from Fairmount Harford Institute. We called it the 2. I tell them not only did I have a tough time navigating that K through 12 system, but I was also in and out of that juvenile justice system. I can't imagine, I told you about my 4 children, but Bazil, I cannot imagine one of them not being under my roof willingly. And my mom had to endure this when I was 13 years of age. My summers consisted of waking up, get on my bike, go outside, play throw football, play pickup basketball, and then we do it all over the next day. Well, one of my friends would say to me, Bazil, I know how to steal a gun. And nobody had taught me, how do you have the mental capacity to be able to say, no, I don't want to do that? And what happens is I then go along to get along, and going along to get along then causes me, the first time that I would leave Baltimore City, would go to Prince George's County to be committed to the DJS system in a facility called Boys Village, Cheltenham. I also tell my young people that you are the 5 key people that you keep the most company of. Because I was making poor choices, those poor choices were compounding. I would find myself making more poor choices. So this wouldn't just happen to me at 13. This would happen to me at 14, 15, 17. Then I also share with them and just try to be vulnerable a little bit because they need to hear it. Not only did I have a tough time navigating K through 12, navigating this DJS system, but I was also in the adult system 2 times before I could turn 18. I can remember a 10-month commitment out in Western Maryland in a facility called Victor Cullen. Coming home back to the same neighborhood, same 4 blocks, expecting a different outcome with the same people. This will be my second time, not even home for 30 days. I'm over Baltimore City Jail, having my 18th birthday over there. And Bazil, I'm gonna say a moment, and then I'm gonna let you ask your next question. But I remember my mom coming to visit me for the first time, the second time that I'm over there. And I remember saying to my mother, I'm 17 years of age at that time, just give up on me. I don't see a path forward. And I'm frustrated because I keep disappointing and frustrating this woman that I love and she loves me so much. Brazil, my mom would say words that still shake me to this moment. She said, Cory, I'm gonna keep believing in you until you believe in yourself. All the things that I've said that I am, the electrician, the entrepreneur, the senator, delegate, that would not be. My trajectory shifted because I had a mother that didn't give up on her son, but my mom actually reached out to the Maryland Department of Labor, finding her son in very disarray and challenges, and said, can you please send me every apprenticeship program? Brazil, 20 years ago, they didn't email you. They will mail you the packet.
Right.
She would then hand me that packet and say, Cory, I need you to fill out applications. And I tell folks, luckily, I was accepted into the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers because this then gave me the opportunity to have new disciplines, to have a certain level of mentorship, but more importantly, learn a skill that no one can ever take away from me. Nobody's coming to my house, putting up receptacles, ceiling fans, outlets, things of that nature, because I went to school for 5 years in order to learn that craft.
During that time when you were 13 and going on 18 in the criminal justice system, what were you feeling? What was the emotions that you felt at that time? Did you feel that you were unstoppable? And at what point did you that regret, that frustration start to build up to where you were like, this path that I'm going right now is not going to get me anywhere?
Yep. Unstoppable probably isn't the right choice of words, but I'll say it's the reason why I'm in service. I didn't realize how many arbitrary barriers are placed in zip codes that I was familiar with versus zip codes that I was unfamiliar with. And when I say something like that, you'd be like, Cory, what are you even talking about? I didn't realize that every day that I walked outside my house and see somebody doing something that they weren't supposed to be doing, that they were emulating behavior. And if you see such a level of concentration of it, eventually you start doing the same thing. I didn't understand that. I never asked myself the question, why is there such a concentration of liquor stores in my neighborhood versus other neighborhoods? I never asked myself the question, why is food insecurity in my neighborhood versus other neighborhoods? I never asked myself the question, why is there such influx or concentration of abandoned homes in certain neighborhoods versus other neighborhoods? And I ain't making excuses. I ain't wanting to make excuses, but when you have all of these different social issues compounding on you, and you have such a level of concentration of poverty that exists around you, then you ask yourself the question, why, when you live in zip codes and you can live 5 minutes away, is the lifespan different? Why is the income different? Why is the education outcomes different in certain zip code? So those are the things that I think about consistently today, and how do you shift and change those types of things? But those are also dynamics that I grew up with. Many of the people that I grew up with, friends, peers, things of that nature, also had. Some make it out, but it's not the majority that make it out those certain situations. And what that then becomes is a generational cycle. What do I mean by a generational cycle? My father had his GED. My brother had his GED. So what was my outcome? I've never failed a grade except for the 12th grade, but I knew I was smart enough to say, I'm better than just getting a GED. I can actually graduate from high school. I need to shift and change that outcome.
You had mentioned that someone came to you and said, hey, I know how to get a gun. And within our community, gun violence is still relevant to this day, but also with that comes death. When was the first time that you experienced death, and what was the feelings, if you can remember, that you had with that, and how did you deal with that and handle that?
I think sometimes we're always dealing with mental health issues. I'm not sure that I still handle death very well. I've only been to a couple funerals, so typically if someone does pass, I try my best to give them their flowers while they're here. I don't want to see them in that other way from that standpoint. So I still don't go to funerals. I still don't accept it from that standpoint, but I try my best to live every day to its moment. And I want to make sure that I'm embracing Brazil, folks like my friends, while they're here, and looking at them in the best form of fashion. The thing that we have to figure out how do we do for our young people is speak life into them. I think that they see death so much. I think that they see challenges, things of that nature so much, that we have to speak life into them, but more importantly, letting them know that they're great every single time that we get a chance. And I think when we do that, we're also speaking from an affirmation standpoint. We're resetting what the mental looks like to make sure that they understand I can do, and I can. But so when I was young, I just didn't dream. I didn't think of certain things. I just couldn't see myself in certain places. I didn't think that certain things were for me. And we need to recreate, we need the challenge, and we need to make sure that our young people understand, put them in every situation. We're all uniquely placed here in order to be successful. And it's my job as an adult to ensure that those tools are there for you to be successful.
Personally for you, what were the steps that you took to handle said grief or emotions that you were going through with loss? As you mentioned, you don't attend funerals, but you try and give people their flowers while they're here now. What were some steps that you took, or who taught you those steps on how to handle grief when you were growing up?
I tell folks that first you got to acknowledge that there's an issue. So when you come up in sometimes urban jurisdictions and everything is such fast, is so many challenges, you always hit very quickly with problems, you just don't learn emotional intelligence. And that's what I had to be able to understand. First, I didn't have it. I only had 0 to 100 because you're not figuring out how do you sustain, you're figuring out how do you survive from that standpoint. So I'm always in survival mode. But eventually, once I started to understand, that's not normal. That's not normal behavior. I then recognized that there was a problem and that I had to adjust it. I had to focus my mind on what are some of the things that I could be doing to make sure that I adjust this behavior to where I'm not always immediately responding and not responding in a way that's not going to create longevity for me from that standpoint. So over periods of times, I've just been able to make sure that I understand you have to do this. There are people that's counting on you. My 4 children are counting on me to do the right thing. My wife is counting on me to do the right thing. My community is counting on me to make good choices. So eventually that behavior, and over periods of times, it becomes a natural discipline once you recognize that it actually exists.
I've had the opportunity to have conversations with young men, whether it's just at school, like at Curly, if I go back to and help them out with whatever events like track or the sports team, or if I'm just out and about downtown and hearing, I think during Men's Health Month, one of the things that I wanted to do was capture, what is some advice that you would give to someone who is suffering? And the biggest thing that they always say is to talk to somebody. Was there someone that you could talk to that you felt safe with, that you could be like, hey, this is what I'm going through, and just having an ear there from somebody to hear what you're going through?
I think some of the challenges that are in our community is that many of these young boys are growing up with strong women, but they don't have a lot of men around them to be able to have that outlet. So I'm taught to hold it in. I got all this negative energy. I got all of this stuff bottled up, and eventually it's going to release. It ain't just sitting there. Eventually it does come out. But how do you make sure that you provide these safe spaces where young people see people that look like them and that they feel comfortable in saying, no, I can do that? I come back to when I think about my brother, and I'll give you an example, Bazil. Like, I can remember a Hagel Baltimore experience, get my bike took. So I go and I get my big brother because I'm like, look, we're going to go get my bike back.
Right.
And I can remember my brother saying to me, you're going to fight this young man. Bazil, this guy was bigger than me. It's kind of the situation we're sitting in right now. So I'm looking Bazil and I'm like, what do you mean you want to fight this guy? I got my tail whooped once. I got my tail whooped twice. I got my tail whooped 3 times. But Bazil, what my brother was trying to instill in me was the best that he knew how. Don't let nobody willingly take something away from you. It's one of the values that I hold while I'm in that legislature from that standpoint, but is that the right way to be able to do it? So it wasn't like he was wrong, but he was trying his best to pour into his little brother the best way that he knew how. And I think that that's the challenge a lot of times in our community, is that we don't have those outlets, or we just weren't taught a certain way. How do you release that frustration? How do you talk things through? Some of the problems don't need to escalate. It could be a small problem, and then all of a sudden it's a problem that you can't even come back from because of this poor choice that you made and you didn't have emotional intelligence from that piece. But like mine's is, everything ain't always an emergency. Maybe I can have that conversation with Bazil. Maybe Bazil has something going on early in that day, and the problem really wasn't me. It was just that he was still trying to figure out how to release that frustration from early in the day. These are the things that I think about at 43, but also try to press upon my young people so that they can make good decisions.
You had mentioned how the emotional intelligence, and a lot of young men growing up today, the women are raising the men. From your experience, how much of a role did your father play into your life? And then what are some things that you learned from him and some things that you try and do better now that you're a father yourself with 4 kids?
Man, that's a powerful question. I think that you can learn from people whether they're doing the right thing or they're doing the wrong thing. So I can't speak for my father, but there were a number of ways that he could have did better. But me being able to see that, and now having, especially, I got 2 girls and 2 boys, but especially with those 2 boys, I know how to move different. I didn't realize that this was a generational thing. I didn't realize that sometimes the man that's in front of you is short-sighted or may not always fully be a man because they didn't learn how to. So those are challenges that they're also internally working with, but also repeating the behavior that they've seen. My job is to break that cycle. How do I break the cycle? Or how do I tell young folks, like, what do we do? When I think about my educational experience, I think about my son's educational experience, I get to drop him off every day, Brazil. I get to drop him off at school. I get to have the same type of conversation that me and you having right now. Every day I say to him, what type of day we gonna have? He say, we're gonna have a great day. Then I ask CJ, I say, how are we gonna make sure and ensure that it's gonna be a great day? He then says, I'm gonna make great choices. So he's planting in his mind very early on in that morning that I have a responsibility to make these great choices. But even at the end of the day, I ask the question, hey, what's something better that we could have worked on? But also, how do we make sure that we're putting him in these curated spaces that he's learning early? I think that you can do that through arts. I think you do it through music. I think you do it through sports. They play sports at the highest level, but they're around other young people, being able to learn, what does teamwork look like? What does wins look like? What does losses look like? What do lessons look like? How do I take direction? All of these experiences that our young people should be able to, so that they can make good decisions when they get older. But it starts with the adults by being comfortable enough to have those conversations that are uncomfortable.
Yeah, the arts, I love the arts. I think that's a great and Baltimore is known specifically and greatly for the arts and everything, the music, everything, culture. But there's some who don't get that opportunity to have someone like you or a mentor. How do we create a space where, one, men want to step up and be a mentor to these young men, and 2, these young men willing to be vulnerable, to come out and be like, hey, not saying I need help, but it would be great to have someone there who I could rely upon, whether it's just to listen to me for a second or give me some advice.
Brazil, I try my best to stay in at least one of my K through 12 schools at least once or twice a week. And I think that this is important because our young people need to see people that look like them in these leadership roles and know that they can also do it. But then when you get the dope experience, I was at Hamilton Elementary, and one of the young men, they were doing like Black History Month, and they were emulating who they believe as leaders. And being able to see a young person choose you as that leader and feeling comfortable to say, no, he's not only accomplished these types of things, but this is exactly what I also want to model, or the behavior that I model. One of the dopest experience, but we as men need to make sure that we're grabbing them at an early age, pressing upon them that it's more than just the children in my house. I have a responsibility to the community to emulate that behavior, but more importantly, talk them through and let them know I'm part of the village. So if you need me, I'm one email away, I'm one phone call away, and this is my responsibility to ensure that you are successful. And hopefully you'll grab 2 more when you do reach that point, and making sure that the cycle continues. But we have to break that generational cycle. I'm gonna lean into the arts piece of it if I can. So I had this, I tell folks that I knew my grandmother and I knew my great grandmother. I can see her kind of a little bit as 5 and a 6-year-old. But I didn't even realize like how important understanding where it is that you come from, the shoulders that you stand on prior to you getting here. And then I started, and this is just like recently, like in the last 5-7 years. And then what I did was we got a genealogy report. And being able to understand, Brazil, like who was here before you is one of the dopest feelings. But then I said, how can I make this even more impactful for my children so that they're clear every day that they wake up who these people are from? I didn't realize I had 6 generations, photos of 6 generations of women in my family. I grabbed this artist, LaToya Peoples, and LaToya ended up painting a portrait where it hangs in my living room at this point in time, where my daughters are in it, my sister, my wife, my mother, her mother, her mother's mother, her mother's mother, so that every day that my daughters can wake up and be very clear. That's how you do generational work. That's how you do legacy work, because you're breaking that cycle. They're clear. Why I didn't always know that, or I didn't have a full understanding at 17, at 16, at 15, they got a very clear understanding because they wake up to it every day.
That sounds like a lot of steps that you do to build that foundation. What's in that process, what would you say is the number one thing that you would recommend people to start out with in helping to build that path to where, like, for example, you are today?
That's a lot, man. That's a lot. I'm there in the decisions that I make today. I'm very protective of my time. So I do not spend my time with everyone, and I do not spend my time everywhere. And I'm gonna say it like I tell my young people so they can get it. I tell my young people that I'm a $100 bill. I'm not a dollar bill. So I'm not in circulation everywhere, and everybody don't have $100. So be able to be protective of your time in that same type of way. Many of the decisions that I make is trying to figure out, how do I not impact a generation, but I'm trying to impact multiple generations. What's some of the things that we doing? I gotta give examples. I think about, like, I didn't realize how big the cemetery, black cemeteries was, or the lack of history around it. We have one right between Bel Air Road, between Erdman and Sinclair, where a shopping center is now over the Laurel Cemetery. And this year, inside of the budget, you'll find that the professors at Coppin, the neighborhood folks that were just making sure that they elevate this conversation so that people know black cemeteries, but there is bodies underneath of the shopping center. They say, hey, we need to make sure that we do a marker. We want to do a nice fencing so that everybody kind of understands. And inside the budget, you'll see $400,000, because that's not something that's going to be beneficial this year, next year. You're going to look 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, that's going to be there. I also think about this gentleman by the name of Mr. Thorpe. Mr. Thorpe has been teaching young folks how to swim for the past several decades. Before him, it was his father teaching folks how to swim. So for the last 60 years, they've been teaching young folks. And swimming is just not like a recreation. This is actually a life skill. And Mr. Thorpe was teaching them in the back of his home. And he was looking for a space, a facility. And I'm thinking to myself, you move in a space of excellence every time I see you. Why is it so hard for you to have a facility? We ended up getting him 3 acres over there on Walther and Northern Parkway, across from the Family Dollar. In the budget, the last 3 years, you'll see he was in there for $750 2 years ago. Last year, he was in there for $450. He in there this year for $100,000. So that way, he can continue to focus on what he's great at, which is teaching folks how to swim, but also have equity and do some legacy work the way he's there, teaching generations afterwards if we do this thing right. That's the type of work I'm trying my best to do, Brazil, but that's the work that I get to do every day, leading, sharing time with folks, but more importantly, the decisions that we make.
In the day and age that we deal with, especially with social media, a lot of young people get their information from there, put their feelings on there. Those things that you just mentioned, being able to swim is such a life skill, but it's also a cool thing to be able to, share and enjoy the water, because a lot of people within our community, maybe they'll go to the pool, but of course they're in the shallow end, so they're not, exploring. But how do you, I guess in a way, combat the negative side of social media and how much it can affect young people? They say that this day and age is the lonely epidemic that's going on within the community. What are the steps do you think that we should take, whether it's the older generation or adults or just in general, of combating this?
So that's crazy. So both of us born in the 80s, right? And we just didn't have to deal with those types of things when we were growing up. And I told you one important thing that I share with my young people. I tell them protect their time. Second thing I always say is protect your mind. Protect your mind. Every day that you wake up, there are people under attack trying to grab one of your greatest assets, which is your mind. I always start my day off in a level of peace. So I ain't watching the TV, watching the news so that I can take in all that negativity. I ain't listening to the radio so that I can take in even more negativity. I'm protecting my mind, especially early when I'm starting the day. Brazil, I'll be honest with you, I read. So I am picking up the papers, understanding what are the current events and things of that nature, but I get to pick and choose what I'm reading versus someone forcing something upon me, trying to say, hey, the algorithm says that you like these types of things and I need to push these types of things on you. And I tell you, if you don't believe me, just listen to the radio.
Right.
Radio playing the same 7 songs. Same 7, you don't even like the songs, you bopping, you shaking, and you're like, man, I didn't even like that song from that standpoint. But then I go back to Brazil in reference to these young folks. Some of the things that we're doing in my house, they always are engaging with other young people. We didn't grab a phone until they had to. So my daughters didn't get the phone until they were 7th, 8th grade. The younger one got a little bit earlier in the 6th grade because he was in school, at a school by himself, not with his siblings. And when I think about that piece of it, and I say that, they all are doing tutoring after they get out of school. They all are doing sports and they're engaging with other young folks. So they have no reason, like they don't play Fortnite. They don't play these other types of things. They ain't on the phone all the time because they're engaging with real people and understanding how do you deal with your social emotions when you're in those spaces. So now that we know what the science is that works, what am I doing as a legislator, as a leader, as an adult? So inside that budget, I'm gonna go back to that budget. I didn't realize how big girls flag football is. But this year in the budget, we got $45,000 to make sure that during the summertime that we are now in the city having girls flag football, and you ain't got to think about the cost barrier.
Right.
So you ain't got to think about the $200 or the $300 that it costs you to play. We're trying to make sure that those folks, those young ladies that are trying to learn, that they can actually have a space. We also are partnering with Boardroom Chess. Boardroom chess is also in the budget. I said, I play chess. I love chess. I love using my critical thinking skills. I love thinking about the move after the move. But how do we make sure that these opportunities are given to all young people, especially in East and Northeast Baltimore, where I represent? So we partnered with Ms. Kim Hicks, and now we're going to have chess tournaments. We're going to have chess mentorship and things of that nature. But these are ways where you don't got to look at your phone. You can get out, be around your peers, but also learn productive things that I think are life skills.
Speaking of interaction with young folks, so as I told you, my parents are immigrants, so there's a certain way that they dealt with things when they were younger. There are certain ways that they dealt with things with us and my brothers and raising us, and seeing that dynamic change, as you alluded to earlier. You know, there were some things that you felt your parents could do better. And I had that same feeling.
I ain't gonna say my mom.
Well,
Not my mom, though.
But there's some things that, you know, do you wish, you know, they didn't do, so you try and implement that into your life. As a dad, in your action with your kids, what are some of the things that, as you said, with young people speaking to other young people, what are some of the conversations that they're having with their peers that they tell you about, and whether it's a struggle or something that they're dealing with, and how you recommend them or guide them as to maybe you should help them with this or that?
Yep. Some of the things that I say, especially with girls, my girls are the oldest. I didn't realize like confidence was a big thing, man. Confidence is a big thing with our young ladies. And the boy, he think he Jordan as soon as he step on that court. But the young lady actually may have the skill set and then don't have the level of confidence to actually go out there and do it. And it's our job as men, as adults, to make sure that they know, no, this is a safe space. Try. Figure out, engage. If you don't like it, that's cool. And if you do like it, let's figure out how we double down on it from that standpoint. You are the 5 people that you keep the company of. If you want to go the furthest, you have to be around other like-minded people. They don't always have to be the high achievers, but they have to be adding value. You're either adding value. Bazil, this conversation is adding value to me because at the end of the day, like, we're using our critical thinking skills. We're figuring out what are the next steps, and they have to elevate themselves, turn up the frequency, and put themselves around other young people that are like-minded. This is so important. You also have to see things. I ain't seen nothing. So like, I remember going out of the country for the first time. I'd never been on an airplane till I was in my 20s, never left the country till I was in my 30s. So Brazil, I never saw nothing to be able to imagine. Brazil, I'm over in Switzerland and I saw people drinking water from a public water fountain on the street. I couldn't even, I'm like, we can't even drink water in our schools.
Right.
So like, how's this? Energy is different, education is different, but you have to get out there, you have to try new things, you have to be able to see things. And what happens is, because so many of my family have also never seen anything, a lot of times they stay with that behavior. I don't want to get on a plane. I don't want to do this, because at the end of the day, it's a mindset. And what happens is you have to move around folks that are elevating you to that next level to get there.
This has been great. We're going to let that breathe for a second, and we'll be back in a moment.
Our Narcan training class begins with one idea, hope. Seconds matter because overdose doesn't wait, and neither can we. It's simple, it's quick, anyone can learn. Give someone a second chance. This is our responsibility, not just to know, but to act. Save a life, fight back, take the class, and be prepared when it matters. The change starts with you. This September, every second Tuesday. Register now.
For kids carrying loss, the world can feel different. Camp Erin offers support, connection, and tools that stay with them long after camp ends. A space for them to be seen, to share, and to begin healing together. Moments like this matter. Register now.
The Healthy Beginnings, Infant Safe, Sleep Equity and Prevention Summit brings Maryland together to share knowledge. It's a full day of real conversations, practical strategies, and research that supports safer sleep and stronger communities. Featuring national voices like Rachel Y. Moon, alongside those with lived experience. If your work touches families, this is where it comes together. Join us. Register today.
Welcome back. Senator, you've worked with Roberta's House for quite some time. Can you talk about that experience and the work that you've done with them?
First, when I think about large corridors like Bel Air Road, Harford Road, North Avenue, I thank them. I thank not just Roberta's House, but the entire March family for what they're doing to anchor the North Avenue corridor, what they're doing from East Baltimore. And I know they all over the state of Maryland, but I'm gonna claim them as mine because they, like I said, they're holding it down for me. But when we think about even a facility right there at North and Cecil, like the state budget was very impactful in ensuring that that space was there for our community. When I think about the work that Ms. Annette is doing just around gun violence, just around young people, just around those that are transitioning, our seniors, like I can't thank them enough because like our mental is so important to our stability from that standpoint. And having that venue, having that space. So I've always been a fan. I was just there a couple weeks ago at their gala at the Center Club, and like every time she calls, every time they call, I'm always going to be there.
You know, public health is an issue, and at Roberta's House, they talk about grief as a public health issue. When you hear something like that, what does it mean to you as a policymaker in trying to help, navigate through that realm?
Yep, I think that, and first I'm gonna just share the lens that I look at it from. So I'm on a budget committee. I'm one of 13 members that get to chop up a $70+ billion budget. I am the chair for Health and Human Services. So all things health, all things human services fall through my purview from that standpoint. So I'm consistently meeting with the Secretary of the Department of Health, but also the Department of Human Services, which both of those things have a correlation in reference to what you're talking about with Roberta's House. And mine is just making sure that from an inclusivity standpoint, that we're represented. I think that for so long in this country, we looked at mental health as a public safety issue versus what it actually is, a mental health issue, and looking at it from a public health standpoint. And Roberta's House plays such a large role in that.
When dealing with something with homicides or overdoses or especially, infant death, how do you move from a reactive response after that? What is something, truly that we can do to make it preventative?
Man, I'm going to give it to you. I talk to you about my neighborhoods. I talk to you about zip codes, but let me put it where you can get it. So in 2020, we went through an issue where 5 homicides had happened at the intersection of Milton and Biddle. And when the community and the Fort Worth community came to their leaders and said, I want you to do something about this. And then when I think about that, Bazil, I was like, what is the connection between this intersection and homicides? I didn't realize there was a liquor outlet at that space. And sometimes we normalize things that's not normal. So what then happens is I said, well, let's map out all of the liquor outlets from North Avenue to McElderry to Luzerne over to Central Avenue. There's 29 liquor outlets in a 1 mile radius. Let's stretch this even more. When we map out those 29, we then said, well, how many homicides and non-fatal shootings have happened at each one of these intersections? Every last one of them had at least one homicide and a non-fatal shooting in the 3-year period. But Milton and Biddle had 29. Caroline and Preston had 19. So you can see the connectivity in reference to the liquor outlet and public safety. But then let's dig a little bit deeper, because you say, hey, how do we solve problems? And I talk about them. So we then said liquor falls under the state purview. I got that one. I didn't realize that in Baltimore City, we were the only jurisdiction in the entire state of Maryland that our liquor outlets were open from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m., 20 hours out of a 24-hour day.
That's crazy.
Not in Anne Arundel, not in Prince George's, not in Howard County, not in Baltimore County. They typically open at 9 or 10, and they close at 9, 10, 11. What we did was we went and changed our hours of operation. Said, let's get back to some level of normalcy. So we had those liquor outlets open at 9, and they now close at 10 if you come in East Baltimore right now. And what you saw was a 50% drop in homicides the following year. That's the type of work that we need to do. Remove those arbitrary barriers that are baked in communities because of public policy, and make sure everybody has the opportunity to reach their highest potential.
In your personal experience with Roberta's house, what are some things that you've, in the interactions with them, that have helped you in what you do?
So I'm gonna come back to a young person standpoint from the density of liquor, and then I'm gonna come back to you to talk about men. So imagine if you're a young person. My wife Demetria, she lived in Oliver, and 1500 block of Oliver Street, and she was walking to Lily Mae Carroll, which is a school on St. Clair Lane. But though she would have walked past 3 liquor stores prior to that school bell ringing, and I asked the message, what are we trying to send to our young people when we prioritize access to liquor versus access to education? But then you ask the question, like, in reference to Roberta's house, what did that do for me? I can remember this. Miss Annette had invited me to a men's group. So they pouring into these men, they have other strong men, making sure that they have resources, things of that nature. But I get to chop it up and speak with these men, 30, 40 of them, right there in the auditorium that they have in a new facility, and then just get to pour into each other. At this time, me and you are sharpening the knife. We're asking questions, we're doing response. I can see that there's some level of dialogue because you're using your emotive skills, but the same energy was transferable in that room. But imagine if that's applied, not just in one day, but that's happening consecutive day after day after day. That's what's making us stronger as a people. That's what's making us stronger as a community. That level of connectivity, but more importantly, providing that safe space for men to be able to thrive.
Do you think that, Baltimore is known for having food deserts? Do you think, or is there conversations within there to be replacing these liquor places with grocery stores or areas of which, people can get their nutrition or whatnot? Because we know diet does play a part in how it feels, with your body, eat good, you feel good, etc. Are those conversations being had? And if not, why is that?
Yeah, so first, just so that the viewers can be able to understand the gravity of the question that you're asking, at these liquor stores, at these bodegas, like these corner stores, you got Huggies, juices, you got soda, you got all types of high cholesterol that are taking the life out of our people, but you can't access fresh fruit, you can't access vegetables, simple basic things. I went in one store and I was like, I can't even believe this, but they didn't have water. So you got all these other things that are taking life off of people, but you don't even have access to some level of bottled water in that space. We have a responsibility. I've tried to figure out the connection between the public transportation and the connectivity to make sure that we're thinking about how do you access fresh food when we're routing public transportation. I've also used subsidies, so I am proud to say that when you come to Central and Orleans in the next couple years, that the intersection of Central and Orleans, right there at that intersection, you'll have a grocery outlet because of the level of subsidy, the couple $1 million that we've been able to place and working with Dana and Danny Henson on. But at the end of the day, I also have people like the Sixth Branch or other organizations that's doing great work, making sure that there's some level of access to fresh food, fresh vegetables, fresh fruit. We talked about zip codes. We talked about outcomes of living in certain zip codes, but this food insecurity is a huge thing. You also can raise the food insecurity if you increase the population. We have to get rid of the influx of abandoned housing, and that's what we're doing. Meaning at its foundation, at its core, to be able to provide affordable ownership. I ain't saying affordable housing, affordable ownership, so that my folks actually own something in the communities that they actually live in. And then you can increase the density, and then you have those store outlets that then say, no, you know what, I have a market, I have income in these certain spaces. That's why you can't always blame a grocer that has to get a return on investment, have a responsibility of getting a return on investment from coming into a neighborhood. You have to increase its population. Baltimore City was one point in time at close to 1 million people, and it's now just above 600,000. We have to address that issue.
If there's a message you could give out to the viewers in regards to what the work Roberta's House has done and what you continue to do moving forward, what would that be?
Roberta's House is the anchor. When you think about the Great Blacks and Wax Museum, you think about the courthouse, but you have Roberta's House on that North Avenue corridor. We do not get where we need to be without them and them anchoring that corner. My goal, if I had a 5-year goal, is to be able to look at and how do I partner with my anchor to do the houses right there on the North Avenue corridor. So we're actually starting to siphon resources to them to be able to start thinking about how do you deal with grief, how do you deal with violence, how do you deal with mental health, but also how do you deal with housing? We need to make sure that we're pulling on them to meet their full potential and thinking about like what is the broader outlook for that respective corridor. And I don't get the luxury of doing that without Roberta's House.
Senator McCray, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I truly appreciate it. Thank you, everything.
Yes, sir.
If someone you know has experienced the loss of a loved one and are seeking help, please reach out to Roberta's House at www.robertashouse.org or call us at 410-235-6633. Until next time, take good care of yourself, and we'll see you on the Real Talk with Roberta's House.
Thank you for joining us for Real Talk with Roberta's House. This program is supported in part by the Baltimore Mayor's Opioid Restitution Fund, the Maryland Department of Health, and by generous donors like you. For more information or to support our work, please visit robertashouse.org. Real Talk with Roberta's House is executive produced by Dr. Alexander Satori Robinson, with video and sound production by 89 Crowns, and leadership from Annette R. March Greer, president and co-founder of Roberta's House. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of our guests and contributors and do not necessarily reflect those of Roberta's House. Thank you for listening and for being part of a community that believes healing is possible.